Welcome to another deep dive. We are thrilled you could join us today because we have a truly bizarre journey lined up for you.
We really do.
You, our ever-curious listener, are probably always looking for those unexpected connections between totally disparate worlds.
Yeah.
And today's mission is going to bridge a massive gap.
A gap you probably didn't even know existed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are taking the clinical, uncompromising reality of forensic science and crashing it head-on into one of the most sensational, creepy maritime ghost stories of the 20th century.
And it's a phenomenal collision of worlds. I mean, on one hand, we are examining objective, undeniable biological facts about how the human body just ceases to function.
Right.
And on the other hand, we have a legendary maritime mystery that has baffled people and spawned endless conspiracy theories for decades.
So let's unpack the stack of sources we are working with today.
We got a great mix.
First up, we have this highly comprehensive medical and forensic manual on thanatology.
Which is the scientific study of death.
Right, the scientific study of death and forensic autopsies, specifically the sections dealing with death and its causes. We're also pulling from a presentation that lays out the chilling historical legend of the SS Ourang Medan.
The notorious ghost ship.
Yeah, from that one. And finally, we are bringing in some incredible digital detective work from the Skittish Library and an investigative thread from Reddit that really attempts to dismantle this entire mystery.
So we have the hard forensic science telling us exactly how the human body reacts to trauma.
And a historical narrative of a ship where an entire crew supposedly died under impossible circumstances.
It really is the ultimate test of the scientific method against a perfectly crafted campfire story.
It really is. The central question we want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this deep dive is this. When faced with a bizarre mystery, where an entire crew drops dead without a single scratch on them, how does a forensic investigator separate fact from fiction?
That's the puzzle.
So let's start with the hard science. We are kicking things off by looking at how forensic pathologists define the actual end of life. Because death isn't just a single cinematic moment where the lights simply switch off.
No, the biological reality is much more gradual. Pathologists generally divide death into two distinct phases.
Okay.
First, there is somatic death. This is what we typically think of as death in a clinical setting.
Like the flat line on a monitor.
Right, the complete and irreversible stoppage of circulation, respiration, and brain functions. It is the systemic failure of the organism as a whole. But after somatic death comes molecular death.
Which is the cellular death.
Exactly.
Wait, so if my heart stops and my brain is offline, isn't that the definitive end of the line? How are my cells doing anything at that point?
Well, molecular death occurs piecemeal because individual cells can actually live on the residual oxygen for a variable amount of time after your circulation has completely stopped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, nervous tissues die very rapidly, meaning the vital centers of your brain are gone in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
But your muscle cells are much more resilient. They can live on for up to 1 to 2 hours after your heart stops beating.
That is incredibly eerie. Your body is technically dead, but on a cellular level, parts of you are still holding on.
Holding on just long enough to use up that last bit of oxygen.
There's a specific chilling rule of thumb from our thanatology source that really stuck with me. It states that breathing stops within 20 seconds of cardiac arrest.
Right.
And the heart stops within 20 minutes of breathing cessation.
20 seconds and 20 minutes.
It is a very precise mechanical timeline of human mortality.
And that mechanical view is essential for a forensic pathologist. They need to understand the exact sequence of systems shutting down.
Regardless of what actually caused the death.
Right, regardless of the remote cause of death, whether it's an illness or a blunt force injury, the actual mode of death always begins in one of 3 systems.
Which the source calls Bichat's triad of death.
Yes. Bichat's triad categorizes these as coma, which originates in the brain, syncope originating in the heart, and asphyxia originating in the lungs.
Let's focus heavily on asphyxia, because the deprivation of oxygen becomes highly relevant to the ghost ship story we are about to explore.
It definitely does.
When someone asphyxiates, the body leaves behind a very specific triad of physical signs, what forensic examiners call asphyxial stigmata.
A forensic examiner looking at a body on an autopsy table is immediately going to look for 3 things. The first is cyanosis.
The bluish skin. Yeah.
A bluish discoloration of the skin, mucous membranes, and internal organs caused by deoxygenated blood. The second is visceral congestion, where blood pools and builds up in the organs due to impaired venous return.
Okay.
And the third, and perhaps most critical for a visual external inspection, are petechia.
The Tardieu spots. I want you, the listener, to really visualize this because it's a profound physiological reaction. Tardieu spots are pinpoint rash-like hemorrhages.
They are produced by a sudden acute rise in venous pressure. As the body struggles for oxygen, the pressure causes thin-walled peripheral venules and capillaries to simply overdistend and rupture.
They just pop.
Basically, yes. You find them most prominently in lax, unsupported tissues where the capillaries are vulnerable, like the eyelids, the conjunctivae of the eyes, and under the pleural membranes of the lungs.
It's essentially the body's internal plumbing bursting under the immense pressure of trying to acquire oxygen.
That's a great way to put it.
So we know what happens inside the body when the systems fail. But the outside of the body is just as much of a biological crime scene. The forensic analysis of mechanical injuries is fascinating.
It really is a map of a victim's final moments. Forensic science meticulously categorizes mechanical trauma into distinct buckets.
Like abrasions and contusions.
Right, you have your abrasions, contusions, lacerations, and then the sharper trauma like incised wounds, chop wounds, and stab wounds.
The timeline of contusions is what really caught my attention. A forensic pathologist can basically read a bruise like a biological clock.
It is amazing.
The color of a bruise completely gives away its age based on the chemical breakdown of the blood under the skin.
It is a beautifully predictable biological process. When a bruise is fresh, it is red.
And then after a few hours, it changes.
Yeah, after a few hours and up to about 3 days, as the hemoglobin begins to break down, it turns blue.
Okay.
By day 4, it shifts to a bluish-black or brown color because of a compound called hemosiderin.
And day 5 or 6?
It turns greenish due to hematoidin.
Right.
And finally, from days 7 to 12, it turns yellow from bilirubin.
A trained examiner can look at a victim, see a yellow bruise on their arm and a fresh red one on their cheek, and immediately know this person suffered trauma on 2 completely separate occasions over a week apart.
Exactly. And it isn't just the age of the injury that tells a story, it is the shape. Patterned injuries are the forensic holy grail.
Because they point to a specific weapon.
A pattern abrasion or bruise can perfectly link a victim to a specific weapon or object. A blow from a rod or a whip produces a very specific tramline or railway line bruise.
What did that look like?
It consists of 2 parallel linear hemorrhages with an area of completely undamaged skin right in the middle.
Oh, wow. The source material also mentions the distinct imprint of a tire tread across a back, or the crescent moon shape of defensive fingernail scratches on a neck.
Or even the incredibly specific geometric bruising left behind by a bicycle chain.
That is so specific.
Even stab wounds reveal more than just the width of the blade. The depth of a stab wound might actually be significantly greater than the length of the knife blade itself if the weapon is thrust into yielding tissue.
Yielding tissue meaning?
In the abdomen, for example, it compresses under the force of the thrust, allowing a 4-inch blade to create a 6-inch wound track.
With all these undeniable physical signatures, the Tardieu spots, the colored bruises, the patterned wounds from a bicycle chain, the defensive scratches, violence always leaves a signature.
It always does.
The human body does not die of unnatural causes without leaving a trace. I want you to hold on to all those physical signs as we leave the autopsy room and journey out to sea.
Because the maritime legend we are about to examine completely defies every single one of those clinical rules.
Let's set the scene. It's either June 1947 or February 1948. American vessels navigating the busy Strait of Malacca, including a ship called the Silver Star.
Though some accounts say it was the city of Baltimore.
Right, they pick up a terrifying Morse code SOS. The distress message is frantic. It says, SOS from Ourang Medan, we float. All officers, including the captain, dead in the chart room and the bridge, probably whole of crew dead.
It is an incredibly dramatic distress call specifically designed to capture attention.
After a series of confused, garbled dots and dashes, a final grim sign-off comes through the radio. I'm dying.
Then total silence.
The crew of the Silver Star manages to triangulate the signal and locate the Dutch freighter, the SS Ourang Medan. When the boarding party climbs onto the deck, they step into a scene straight out of a horror movie.
The ship itself is completely undamaged. No signs of a storm, no collision, no piracy, but the entire crew is dead.
Even the ship's dog is found dead.
Yes, even the dog.
It is how the bodies are found that really cemented this story into legend. The accounts describe the corpses sprawled out on their backs, their faces frozen and upturned to the sun.
Just staring up.
Their mouths are gaping open, their teeth bared, and their eyes are staring upward in absolute terror. Many of them have their arms outstretched as if fending off an unseen attacker.
And here is the forensic puzzle. This is where our medical principles come back into play.
the lack of evidence.
Exactly. The boarding party reports that there are absolutely no visible signs of injury on any of the bodies. No abrasions, no contusions, no stab wounds, no blood.
No tramline bruises, no bicycle chain, marks no defensive fingernail scratches.
Absolutely nothing.
And before the Silver Star crew can secure a tow line to bring the ghost ship back to port and figure out what happened, smoke begins pouring out of the number 4 cargo hold.
The rescue crew is forced to evacuate immediately.
Moments later, the SS Ourang Medan violently explodes and sinks to the bottom of the ocean, taking the bodies and all the evidence with it.
We have a mass casualty event with zero visible trauma, and the crime scene is instantaneously destroyed.
Just gone.
So let's evaluate the 3 main theories the sources provide for what happened, applying the forensic science we just discussed.
Theory number 1 focuses on carbon monoxide or toxic asphyxia. The presentation suggests an undetected smoldering fire in the boiler system could have slowly filled the ship with carbon monoxide.
From a purely medical standpoint, this theory holds up well. Forensic pathology categorizes this under toxic asphyxia. Poisonous substances like carbon monoxide bind to the hemoglobin and prevent the body's use of oxygen.
Which leads to what exactly?
This leads to a rapid coma and unconsciousness. Crucially, it causes death without any external mechanical trauma. It perfectly explains the lack of bruises or defensive wounds.
But does it explain the explosion or the expressions of sheer terror? Not really. CO poisoning usually results in a peaceful drifting off to sleep.
Right, it doesn't fit the visual descriptions.
This brings us to theory number 2. Smuggled chemicals. The historical context here is post-World War II. The ship could have been carrying unsecured, illicit, hazardous materials.
Perhaps potassium cyanide nitroglycerin, or even leftover World War II nerve agents.
If seawater leaked into the cargo hold and reacted with these chemicals, it could release a massive cloud of toxic gas.
Forensically and historically, this is highly plausible. A massive sudden exposure to toxic nerve agents or cyanide gas would cause rapid death across the entire crew.
And the dog.
And the dog without leaving mechanical injuries. Furthermore, if the corrosive seawater eventually reached a cache of unstable nitroglycerin, it perfectly explains the sudden fire in the hold and the massive explosion that destroyed the ship.
Then we have theory number 3, which gets into the paranormal and UFO territory.
Because of those specific sensational details.
Right, the gaping mouths, the eyes staring in sheer terror, the bodies pointing at the sky. Some suggest they were literally scared to death by something otherworldly. Can you actually be frightened to death?
Surprisingly, yes. According to the medical literature on sudden death, cardiovascular collapse can be triggered by psychology.
By sheer terror.
Extreme emotional stress or sudden sheer terror can cause a massive release of adrenaline. In a normal person, this sudden adrenaline dump can initiate ventricular fibrillation and cause instantaneous physiological death.
Basically a heart attack.
A phenomenon known as vagal inhibition.
Extreme fright basically shorts out the heart's electrical system.
And the most important forensic detail regarding vagal inhibition is that it causes sudden death without leaving a single mark on the body.
Wow.
At autopsy, there are no characteristic postmortem appearances. From a purely medical standpoint, an entire crew dying of sudden cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror without a physical mark on them is theoretically possible.
However, statistically improbable.
Highly improbable.
We have 3 theories that all vaguely fit the forensic profile of a death with no external injuries. But as the expert medical text points out, a forensic pathologist cannot work in a vacuum.
No, they need context. History clothing the scene of the crime.
The manual has an entire section dedicated to the negative autopsy, which occurs in 2 to 5% of all cases.
This is a scenario where a gross external examination, microscopic internal checks, and toxicology all fail to reveal a cause of death.
2 to 5% is pretty high.
It is. A negative autopsy is almost always due to an inadequate history or a lack of toxicological analysis.
Because the Ourang Medan exploded and sank, we have 0 history, 0 toxicology, and 0 bodies. No autopsies could ever be performed. It is the ultimate locked room mystery at sea.
But this is where the story takes a massive pivot. We don't actually need an autopsy to solve the mystery of the Ourang Medan.
We have something far more effective for this specific case: digital archival sleuthing. The researchers on Reddit and the Skittish Library completely flipped this mystery on its head by tracking down the origins of the story.
It's amazing what they found.
For decades, the earliest known mention of the Ourang Medan in English was thought to be a 1952 U.S. Coast Guard publication.
That Coast Guard report was treated as an official record, but it was actually sourced from a series of articles printed in a Dutch-Indonesian newspaper back in 1948.
And where did the Dutch newspaper get the story? They got it from an Italian man living in Trieste named Silvio Shirley.
Supposedly, Shirley heard the tale from a local missionary who heard it from a lone German survivor who washed up on a remote atoll, told the story, and then immediately died himself.
It is the most absurd friend of a dead guy urban legend setup imaginable.
The researchers dug into newspaper archives and found something that breaks the timeline wide open. They uncovered Associated Press newspaper reports from the United Kingdom.
Specifically, the Yorkshire Evening Post and the Daily Mirror.
Yes.
The date on those British newspapers. November 1940. 7 years before the ship supposedly sent its SOS in 1947.
The 1940 Associated Press articles contain almost the exact same core narrative. But because we can compare the 1940 version with the 1948 version, the glaring inconsistencies emerge.
Proving this is a fabricated romance of the sea rather than a historical event.
Absolutely.
The shifting details are hilarious when you line them up. Let's look at the location. In the 1940 newspaper article, the ghost ship was reportedly found off the Solomon Islands.
Right.
But when the story was reprinted in 1948, the location magically shifted to the Marshall Islands, which is 1,300 miles away.
In even later versions of the myth, it shifted again to the Strait of Malacca, which is 4,000 miles away from the original 1940 location.
That is a big jump.
It seems our ghost ship had a terrible travel agent, or the hoaxer was getting very lazy with his geography.
Well, there's a very specific reason for that last geographic shift. Ourang Medan literally translates from Malay to man from Medan. Medan is a major city in Indonesia directly adjacent to the Malacca Strait.
Ah.
The later versions of the myth conveniently tailored the ship's location to match the fake ship's name.
It is a classic sign of a tall tale being polished and embellished over time to sound more authentic. We also see this evolution in the distress call itself.
How so?
The original 1940 newspaper article reports the SOS as specifically requesting a warship.
Which makes sense.
Right. In November 1940, the world is fully engulfed in World War II. So a civilian freighter calling for a warship makes perfect contextual sense.
When the story is repackaged in 1948, the warship detail is conveniently dropped from the original SOS because it was no longer relevant in a post-war setting.
Exactly.
Instead, the 1948 version dials up the Hollywood horror, adding all the macabre details about the staring eyes, the dead dog, and the gaping mouths that were completely absent from the 1940 report.
The conclusion is quite clear. Silvio Shirley of Trieste, the source of the 1948 story, was almost certainly the source of the 1940 Associated Press story as well.
He likely invented the tale in 1940.
But because the actual horrific real-world events of World War II dominated the news cycle, his ghost ship hoax was buried and forgotten.
He just sat on it. He waited until the war was over, dusted off his script, added some terrifying new special effects, and successfully relaunched the hoax in 1948.
And it worked beautifully.
It made it all the way into an official U.S. Coast Guard publication in 1952.
This exercise is a masterclass in critical thinking and source evaluation.
It really is.
Just as a forensic pathologist shouldn't accept a suspicious death at face value without a proper, rigorous autopsy, we as consumers of information shouldn't accept a historical narrative without tracking down its origins.
Combining the clinical, unyielding precision of forensic science to understand what is physically possible with rigorous historical fact-checking and archival research allows us to completely sink even the most famous of ghost ships.
The medical science told us how the body should have reacted to various traumas. The newspaper archives told us how the story was constructed.
Together, they dissolve the mystery entirely.
They absolutely do.
It is deeply satisfying to piece a puzzle together like that. But before we let you go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought, drawing directly from the medical manual's warnings about those negative autopsies we discussed.
The 2 to 5% of cases where the cause of death remains hidden from the examiner.
The manual explicitly warns pathologists that sometimes a cause of death is entirely missed, simply due to an inadequate external examination.
It lists things like failing to spot a tiny venomous insect bite hidden in the hairline.
Or a snake bite.
Or a microscopic lethal needle mark on a victim's skin.
It is a sobering reminder of human error. If the doctor blinks or the lighting is poor, the critical evidence is missed entirely.
The body is clear, but the evidence is just too small to see.
Imagine for a moment that the SS Ourang Medan hadn't been a hoax from a guy in Trieste. Imagine it had been a real physical crime scene bobbing in the ocean, boarded by frightened, exhausted sailors who weren't trained pathologists.
What if the terrifying, unmarked deaths of historical maritime legends weren't the result of ghosts or aliens or invisible toxic gases? What if they were simply the tragic result of not having a highly trained forensic eye present to spot the single fatal pinprick before the ship exploded and the evidence washed away forever? Something for you to ponder the next time you hear a story that seems just a little too impossible. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.